everyone. Welcome to the Soft Skills Salon and Audible Think Tank podcast. I am your host, Diana Kowarski. This is the podcast where you learn how soft skills make a difference to your work, your teams, and your organization. Here we listen to diverse voices, novices, experts, etc., discussing their real-life perspectives, strategies, and insights. Each episode is a conversation based on our Soft Skills Impact Questionnaire, 15 questions from which our guests pre-select a few of those questions that are of particular interest or resonance with them. What we say on the podcast is conversation is the currency of communication. We're going to have a conversation today with a fantastic individual, if I do say so myself, who I consider both friend and colleague, David Chapman. David is a skilled trainer and executive coach with nearly 20 years of experience. He expertly combines his knowledge and understanding of training, needs analysis, design, delivery, and evaluation with an innovative understanding of leadership development built up through years of working with global clients in both the private and public sectors. His creative and energizing style, coupled with a deep understanding of many market sectors and cultures, ensures a development experience that results in positive change, increased well-being, and commercial uplift. He is the founder of International L&D Practitioners, the Starfish Group, a co-founder of CEO Whispering, the premier development organization for new HR directors, and is also co-host of Espresso Briefing, the podcast for leadership insights. One day, he would like to slow down and take it to only fifth gear. Hi, David.
Hello, Diana. That is so true. I mean, we are recording this on a Friday, nearly Christmas, and I tell you, we've got that thing, but you know what? I'm going to stay in fifth gear just for you.
I appreciate it very, very much. I also appreciate your time and that you pre-selected from our questionnaire. The first question that we're going to start our conversation on is, what does success leading others look like to you?
And what a very eloquent question it was when you gave it to me. And there are plenty of thoughts I have about it. I suppose I see there, once you rise above individual contributor, I see there as being essentially three roles. You can be an entrepreneur, you can be a leader, you can be a manager. And obviously everybody, may take a blend of those three roles. But I think that everybody in that executive space has got a desire or a proclivity towards one of those three roles. And I think there's an active verb for each of those three roles. So I think for me, for an entrepreneur, their job is to create. And every entrepreneur I've ever met is a creative being, wants to bring into being that has not existed before. What's a manager's role? I kind of see a manager's role to secure. They're securing results, they're securing resources for their people, they're enabling. So you think about what a leader's role is. I suppose for me, the active verb is to inspire. So every leader that I've ever worked with, either internally or externally as a coach, or any leader I've ever observed from business, from sports, entertainment, etc., whatever it is, they've got to inspire. They've got to magnetize all that discretionary effort, that passion, that will to be excellent from everybody around them. And that's the essence of leadership. I also think there are a lot of leaders who don't quite do that.
Fair enough. So if I understand, then the entrepreneur as the creator, as you said, we create in that stream or in that portfolio where there may have been nothing before. So by insinuation, there's some innovation, there's some newness there that can be of attraction to a certain kind of leader, certainly, and to perhaps the repulsion of other kinds of leaders. And I hear then that the managers are in perhaps a maintenance or maybe perpetuation mode around securing Is that fair for managers?
No, I think that's probably a bit unfair. And I'm sure a lot of managers would balk at that and feel that undersells them to some point. I think that a manager is there to secure results. Certainly. And there are clear targets placed on managers, there are KPIs or OGSM to in the HR world, et cetera. But so it's very much here's a task. You might have some leeway in terms of how to deliver it, but this is what you need to deliver, and that's been set to some extent. So how can you secure that result for us while securing the buy-in of your team, securing the growth in knowledge or capability that they need? I think that's the managerial role. The leadership role is to ignite and inspire. So it could be that one individual wears both hats. They see there's a leadership aspect to my role, there's a managerial aspect to my role. So I don't think they're singular to an individual. They're probably more like hats to wear. I think what I've learned is that in my experience, people are often, really good at one. They're sometimes pretty good at two. Right. I don't think I've met that many people who are good at all three. So I suppose to some extent there are overlapping skill sets, but there are some key points of difference, which means it's really rare to find somebody who has the desire as well as the capability to wear all three at a really high level of competence.
And I like that idea of hats. I often refer to that in my own approach because it can be quite simplistic, perhaps even naive, to suggest that these are discrete roles, that one is solely manager, solely leader, solely entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's like the classic oppositional quadrant models, things like Myers-Briggs and DISC. I'm that or that. Well, that's not humanity, is it? We're infinitely more complex than that. So I like the and rather than the or. I'm that and that and that, probably in that order on a good day. But on a bad day, I'm that and that. But within that, if they're hats to wear, or I think of them sometimes like shots in tennis, a forehand, a backhand, and a volley. Actually, I'm only ever going to be as good as my weakest one. So if I work on that and get it to an acceptable level of competence, that's going to make me the most effective executive I can, assuming we're talking about executives. But I like the idea of hats, of learnable skills, to say, this is just a set of competencies. And if I so wish, I might not be the best person in the world if I work at it, but I can be 10, 20, 30% better.
Right.
For my own benefit, but also for the betterment of people around me.
And if we try and compare or at least compress some of your analogies, perhaps there's a opportunity here for designing hat wear for tennis players in your future, David? I'm not sure.
Do you know what, Diana? I'm always open to a bit of merch. You know what? And if the soft skills salon can merch it up in the world of tennis and leadership in that interesting intersection, I'm all for it. As long as I get 10%, I'm happy.
Fantastic. You did mention, and I want to talk about this space, because if managers are indeed enabling and securing results, as you have said, there's this buy-in piece there that you also emphasized. And I'm interested to see if we can discuss the space between buy-in and inspiring. What is that space either between or what is the overlap between, because inspire is part of the leader role and buy-in the manager?
I suppose it's about energy out and energy in. If you're the leader, you're sitting in that leadership role. And by your behaviors, your actions, your communications, and by the energy exchange that you create when people are around you or exposed to you, because it could be through a virtual medium, that's creating an energetic pull. That's the magnet. Now, the outcome of that could be that people feel a strong connection to you, but they still might not feel a strong connection to the organization or the project that's being espoused, et cetera, et cetera. So to an extent, I suppose buy-in would therefore be the recipient making that choice to say, I'm going to attach to all of this, I'm going to commit to all of this, not just because I like that person, I connect to that person, or that person's got charisma, or that person inspires me with how they go about things, but there's something sort of supra to both of us that pulls me in. So I think that, people obviously do buy into leaders, but they buy into the message that the leader gives more. Obama's a great speaker, but if Obama didn't have a message that people bought into, would they buy in as much? So I think there's the individual competencies or proclivities or skills or general goodness of the individual, and then it's the quality of the message, the purpose, really, I suppose. I mean, in an organizational sense, I'll always link it back to purpose.
Fair enough. And
no why, no way.
Yes, no why and no way. And I'm reluctant for us to discuss the value of mission statements or vision statements, because I know we all have opinions on those. And however, there can be a supra idea, as you suggested, if we are looking at buy-in versus inspiration, that there is at least some language, and maybe purpose is a better choice of word, that resonates, that is a guide, touchstone, perhaps. Does that fit in?
And I will slightly apologize for the word supra. I was going to use the word meta, but I didn't want all the pretentiousness alarm bells going off at one time. So I thought I'd go supra.
I don't know if you avoided that very well. Supra or meta, I'm not sure.
I know. It's the end of the day here in the UK, so forgive me. Right. Mission statements, the word mission, I think, has become so debased that it doesn't really have impact anymore.
I agree.
Whereas I think purpose somehow is a finer word. It's got a much older lineage. And therefore it doesn't feel so much like management or leadership speak. It feels much more elemental. And so when I think about purpose, in terms of vision, I have a particular view on vision, mainly because I designed a vision triangle, which was a structure for helping individuals, organizations, and teams create vision. Because I was working with organizations about 6-7 years ago, and they were talking about needing a new vision, but there was no framework for articulating a vision. So I thought, well, okay, if there's no one out there, I better invent one myself, and was lucky enough to work with my wonderful colleague Neil, who had some great ideas, and he created the basis for something which I then worked on. We came up with a vision triangle. And what it basically articulates is this, that there are 3 elements to vision. And you've got to see them as 3 legs of the stool. And so if you take one leg away, the stool falls over. So, for instance, you've got a very elemental, instinctual aspect that we might call direction. 2 key questions. Where do we want to be, by when? And that's really what the entrepreneur focuses on.
Right.
They want to basically say, okay, where am I going to fire my arrow? Where are we getting towards? And give me elementally a timescale for getting there. Instinctively, that's all I want to know. That's direction. Then there's an axis of the triangle called purpose. And that's 2 aspects that it's addressing, which is, first of all, why? Because anybody that's sort of heart-driven says, I want to go there, I want to go by this time, because why? Why are we doing it? Why should I care? Why am I going to give you all my discretionary effort? Why am I going to give my heart and soul to this escapade? I want to know why. And heart-driven people also want to know, well, who are we going to be? What's our identity? So if you have those 2 aspects, raison d'être and identity, that forms part of purpose. Now, once you've established that, strategy is a response to direction and purpose. Once you know where we're going, by when, and for what reason, and who we're going to be in the journey of getting there, then you say, okay, so what do we need to do in order to get there? What do we need to prioritize? And how are we going to measure it? I think, and I wouldn't I? But I think that's a much fresher way to look at vision. But also it satisfies the entrepreneur leader manager model, because entrepreneurs want to look at direction and leaders tend to focus on purpose and managers tend to focus on strategy. So if you're wanting to secure, you're answering the questions what and how. And if you're wanting to ignite and inspire, why and who. And if you're wanting to create, where and when.
There's a lot there. Thank you so much, David. That's certainly an impressive framework that makes a lot of sense. I had resonating with me as I've worked recently with some people who clearly benefited from having a spotlight placed upon their search for meaning. And that's what the why question is all about. And that opportunity to expand and to put in your core hours and your extracurricular hours when you have clarity of that connection. I think there's a lot there that does serve as the underpinning for leaders to indeed inspire. So there's a lot that has resonated with some of my more recent work around that one.
Well, I wonder if I can ask you a question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the organisations that you've worked with over the last 2 years, have you seen a difference in terms of commitment, discretionary effort, and just good energy in those organisations that have got a real clear sense of purpose, and a sort of struggle, a wade through treacle for organisations that don't have that sense of purpose and are really struggling with attrition and attraction and presenteeism and dealing with the return to the office first? Have you seen that in the organizations you work with?
So it's the presenteeism in particular that I would have the most thoughts on in thinking about the last 2 years. And the small, however frequent manifestation of that is I have heard many people and have had numerous conversations in these last 2 years about individuals' commutes to the office and how punitive their commute is into the office. And by insinuation or association, I'm not sure, that somehow that there is a burden of responsibility for their employer to bear in relationship to the geographic distance between their home and their office, which pre-COVID had not been a part of the lexicon, had not been a consideration. And, well, to be frank, in Canada, we're accustomed to some remarkably long commutes. And on a global basis, we are up there. I don't know the exact number, but it's not unusual for someone to commute in excess of 60 minutes, 90 minutes one way if all of their connections are in alignment to their office. And it's in these last 2 years where commitment and discretionary efforts and energy has synthesized into these conversations. And I don't believe employers choose where their staff choose to reside. I don't know of an employer who has done that. And so to bring your potential commute as a part of your productivity into conversations with your employer now as a means of negotiating hybrid work, on-site work, geographically dispersed work has made a lot of unusual conversations that I believe are still ongoing because there is this association, insinuation that the employer is involved. So I'm not sure what to do with that. Have you had anything like that?
Well, I live in a much smaller country, so it might not be quite so painful. But what I do think is this, that if we're talking about soft skills here, that genie is not going to go back into the bottle. And what's that Joni Mitchell line? Then it seemed to go, you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Yes,
you
very
know,
good.
When people have losing the pleasure and the freedom and the extra energy that working from home 5 days a week has given them, they're really noticing it now, and their expectation levels have massively changed as a result of 2.5 years of COVID. So that's not going to change. And if the argument is that being together physically improves innovation, social connection, cohesion, et cetera, you've got to now make a different and more powerful argument to people to come back into the office so
Right.
you can receive all those concomitant benefits. Now, you're only going to persuade and convince and cajole if you've got the ability to inspire by your own personal energy, but also by being able to articulate a higher purpose that says to people, if they're living, I don't know, 80 miles away out of the centre of Toronto, for instance, well, this is the reason why you want to come in. And actually, it might only be because of your relationship with me that you're prepared to do it. Nothing else may motivate you. And I suspect that that is absolutely the case, particularly in North America. So that is essentially the soft skill of speaking to a higher value, a purpose that's more than just a mission statement that a bunch of executives on a 2-day jolly went off and bashed up on a laptop in a hotel. That just won't do anymore. And so
you're absolutely right, David. And if I may, what I've also seen here locally is that burden / opportunity has been relegated to that level within organizations that are indeed supervising or managing individual contributors. And there are some varying levels of sophistication and or experience and competencies and personalities when there isn't a pan-organization approach, when the approach is figure it out for your team. If that manager with that title does not have the social credit to inspire, it can be remarkably difficult to then have that opportunity / hindrance of having to represent the bigger possibility of convening on site for X number of days as beneficial.
Yeah.
And I completely concur with you. And
I mean, now your only lever is a compliance or coercion.
Right.
So you've got to take the Elon Musk route. Good luck with that.
It's a tough, yes, exactly.
or you're sort of saying, well, we've decided that, and it's the compliance route. Well, now when there's such a war on talent, for talent, I should say, and when there are challenger brands popping up all over the place saying, yeah, you can work from home 5 days a week, and we've got such a great technical business model that we're allowing you to do that. Now, the organizations that demand their people in 3 days a week, they're not going to fly. They are going to crash and burn. And so I think we're now fully seeing the fruition of 21st century business, which is a purpose-driven model. And those culturally 20th century businesses are going to start withering and dying. And some very big names are going to start withering and dying. And I obviously can't name names I wouldn't want to, but I am seeing that in more traditional industries. They are really struggling and they don't have answers. And because they've invested very much in the managerial part of the axis, and they haven't really paid much heed to the leadership or the entrepreneurial part of the axis, they're suffering. And that suffering ain't going to get any easier, in a more humble opinion.
Fair enough. Shall we try another question?
Go for it.
Okay. The next selected one was, how have you created teamwork during your career so far? So interested to hear about your immediate experiences on this one, David.
In terms of me leading a team, I would say that, again, I've always tried to establish that sense of purpose, saying this is why we're doing it. And if we get it right, this is how we're going to create a benefit to ourselves and to the recipients of whatever it is we're creating. So that's where I'll always start from. Again, know why? No way. So to articulate that as powerfully and as inspirationally as I possibly can, and then check in with people. Say, okay, is that floating your boat? How inspired are you by that? Does that work for you? And then I think it's a process of genuinely inquiring with people. Say, okay, are you still bought into this? Is this still working for you? And if it is, and there are any problems with team cohesion, then usually I find it's either a confidence or a capability issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if it's a capability issue, well, great. That's a skills gap. That's a training issue, or maybe a mentoring. And if it's a confidence issue, then I think that sits in the world of coaching. And I would always encourage the leaders that I work with to have at least rudimentary coaching skills so they can coach people around confidence. And if it's not capability of confidence, yes, it may be motivation. And as I said, if they still buy into the purpose, there just may be some extracurricular factors going on in their personal life that's what's impeding. That's what the block and the barrier is. And, when I'm as an external coach, well, I'm working with clients and they'll sometimes say to me, oh, no, I know exactly how to do it. And I'm completely confident about doing it. And I'm motivated to do it. It's just all this other stuff in the other world that I inhabit that's dragging me down, that's energetically impeding me. To which the response is, fine. It's a blank sheet of paper as a coach. Is that where you would find the most value in addressing? Because I know the recipient organization is going to get a result by taking all of that stuff away. Mm-hmm. So I say to the client, fine, let's focus. If that's what your agenda is, it's your agenda. Let's focus on that. So I think setting that sense of purpose at the start, but also trying to renew it, going back to people as well, saying, is this still relevant? Are we still shooting? Is this still the moon we want to shoot for?
And that word renew is the first one that I had written down in listening to you speak about the importance of checking in. I think that there's a space there that in terms of more granular, even providing almost a rubric, that the act of checking in for some managers is one that can be very much foreign territory and can be unfortunately avoided or can be done in perhaps self-defeating and perhaps other alienating kinds of ways. And I know it might at the surface sound a bit prescriptive, David, but I would ask, how exactly, with an example, might a newer manager, would you advise them to check in? What would be some of the language you might offer?
Well, I think, first of all, to ask questions. So, okay, people, what do we feel is the purpose of this team? How do we understand it? Or of this organization, whatever unit you're dealing with, let's say the team. What do we feel the purpose of this team is? What do we exist to do? I think another good question is, what would the world miss if we didn't exist? And just genuinely get people's responses, and don't be afraid of what the response might be, because some people's response might be, I haven't a clue.
Right.
And I think that a lot of managers don't do that because they are scared of the response. So they'll say, well, this is the mission statement that our glorious leaders put up 5 years ago. Right, so just work with that. And of course, it's completely redundant because the world's moving at a rate of knots, nowadays. So I say, what are we here to achieve? Mm-hmm. What would the world miss if we didn't achieve? Are we all aligned on that? Any differences? Okay, if this statement is not fit for purpose anymore, what could we create? What would we be inspired to set our cap at, if that metaphor translates to a global audience?
It does.
What would we be inspired? What is the arrow we want to chase? And then to really have that conversation fully first before you start getting into what are we going to do and how are we going to measure it? My experience is way too many managers, way too many businesses just want to focus on strategy because it feels manageable and it's targetable and it's smart. Mm-hmm. It might be smart, but it's not inspiring.
There's a lot there. I'm a big proponent of the value of questions, and whether it's leadership or team building or coaching or interpersonal skills in general, there's such an emphasis for some of us to have the answers and to package statements and to, of course, try to achieve some eloquence in either our speaking or in our writing. Yet simultaneously, I'm convinced that not having the answer and formulating some thoughtful, purposeful, deliberate, and well-crafted questions of an open-ended or closed-ended orientation can be of much higher yield in terms of relationships. Do you have any thoughts on questions?
Completely. But I think here's the strange anomaly. The people who may know the least, i.e. new managers, are the ones who are most terrified of asking questions. And I think the reason for that is they're saying they might have just got their first level supervisory role. And they're thinking, my value is in all the stuff I know. If I don't know stuff, people will expose me for being an imposter. And therefore I must know at all times, which means that they're more about tell than they are about ask. So it is a strange anomaly. The people who may know the least are the ones who are telling the most. I think it requires quite a confidence in an individual to say, okay, and a vulnerability to say, yeah, I don't know the answer. Let's have a conversation about this. Let me ask questions. But what I do firmly believe is that if you do build that comfort in yourself to ask questions, to create a space for other people to share their thoughts, their desires, their dreams, their fears, their inspirations, their innovations, you're going to get to the top pretty quickly.
I completely agree with you. And the other side to this, or another side perhaps, is that I often am supporting individuals who may indeed be new to that role, as you suggested. And there can be, of course, varying levels of confidence. However, asking questions is a form of data mining and creating what basis of your decision making or approach in problem solving may not have any other access to. And to your point, many people who do rise from individual contributor to some sort of leader or supervisory role tend to think that, well, I got here because I know something, so let me white knuckle my hold on what I know. But the phrase, and I'm not sure who to attribute to, of whatever got you here might not get you there, comes to mind. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I think it's probably what got you here most probably won't get you there. And I found that another time. And I'll give you another quote from a virgin saint, Saint Richard of Branson, which was, "If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room."
Right. Yeah, that's a great one.
So don't be afraid to not be, so, well, if I'm not the smartest person in the room, why did I get this promotion? Well, you got this promotion, hopefully, because of your ability to make manifest the glory of everybody else around you. And if you can do that, you're kind of a rainmaker of people. If you're the person, and I've worked with plenty of really inspirational coaches, managers, leaders, and their key ability is to get the best out of the people around them. I mean, we're currently in the middle of a World Cup, and we can have a long conversation about the veracity of the World Cup itself and the corruption about how it got there. But and also remembering that Canada went out first round. So I don't want to talk about
nice, David. Nice. We'll leave that alone.
But the current England team manager, Gareth Southgate, is an absolute exemplar of this. That his particular brilliance is in his humility and vulnerability and his ability to create an incredibly emotionally intelligent environment whereby the England players who for the last 50, 60 years have just manifested fear of the shirt, fear of the legacy every time they go on the pitch, just don't seem to have that now and have a cohesiveness which, along with their talent, is making them the most successful England team since 1966, which is a date that all English people bang on about because we've not won anything since that point. So to throw off the terrible shackles of that oppressive legacy by creating an atmosphere where everybody can contribute, where there's humility, where there's vulnerability, with a leader saying, I don't know all the answers, I can ask questions. It's all about how I bring the best out of everybody else rather than be the big I am. That, for me, that's a leadership role model.
Fair enough. And as we wrap up our time together, which goes by so quickly whenever we connect, that ability to make manifest the glory of others that you mentioned, certainly the ability to make manifest the glory of this podcast is one that I owe to you. So very much for your time and all of your insights, David. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been delightful to do this, Diana.
Thank you very much for listening to another dynamic and informative episode of the Soft Skills Salon with your host, Diana Kowarski. Please consider subscribing to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we also encourage you to visit our website and social media links, which you can find in the show's notes. We look forward to bringing you another episode. And remember, conversation is the currency of communication. Bye for now.